Hola. Bueno, merci per venir, sobretot en aquest context tan estrany. Gràcies al Serafín, la Shiva i la Bàrbara per venir. Estem molt contents de tornar a ser aquí al Born. Havíem de fer aquesta sessió a l'abril, em sembla, o sigui que anem mig any tard, però en qualsevol cas molt contents. I molt contents especialment perquè es tracta d'un projecte que m'he dit tot el rato. Crec que hi ha un problema amb aquest micro. Bueno, presentem aquesta col·laboració inèdita entre Shiva i la Bàrbara Held. I aquest matí també el Serafín ha fet un taller molt interessant al voltant de la qüestió de la música i els videojocs i com els videojocs han contribuït a crear una espècie d'inconscient sonor col·lectiu. Intentarem en aquesta taula rodona parlar d'algunes d'aquestes qüestions i tenint en compte el nombre de persones que som, potser la podem fer extensiva al públic, és a dir que en qualsevol moment sentiu-vos lliures d'intervenir i de fer preguntes, comentaris, el que vulgueu. Vaig a fer una cosa que és llegir amb la mascareta, amb les ulleres que s'entelen. És un micro que no acaba d'anar bé, però bé. A veure. Passo l'anglès perquè ens entengui la Shiva. So I was hoping, Shiva and Barbara, podem fer alguna cosa amb aquest micro? És que la que em moc es deixa de fer contacte. Hola? Merci. Hola, hola. Hola? Passem del micro, no? És que no cal el micro, pot ser? Hola? Ara. So, I was hoping that you could speak a bit about your collaboration. How did this go? I'm really happy, I was saying, I'm really happy that we are presenting this collaboration, which is in edit. You haven't worked together before. And yeah, I don't know if you could speak about how this collaboration relates directly or indirectly with the notion of the memory and the ontology, and also, of course, the work of Daphne Oram. I don't know, so feel free to comment as you like.
Well, first of all, it's, the way that Barbara and I are working is really to do with free improvisation and free form, kind of almost telepathic kind of feeling of just being in the moment and letting our energy and the subconscious nature of sound and energy and space kind of take its own course, and that in itself is kind of ontological. But also, yeah, I mean, stuff to do with Daphne Oram, I guess. I'm going to sample Daphne Oram's voice. I've got this recording of her testing out some microphones, and she's testing out the microphones, and I'm going to create a composition in duet with Barbara with her voice. So I'm going to manipulate that, which hopefully will be quite fun. But yeah.
Would you like to add something, Barbara?
Shiva's work in the last few years as in English or in
English, yes.
In English. Okay. She's been working with the legacy of Daphne Oram, and especially exciting are the pieces that she's doing with orchestral musicians and with a full orchestra. And in a way, Daphne Oram and the other composers of that era were a sort of very special moment in the history of classical music, because they were still very much connected to classical instruments and writing for orchestral players, but at the same time the electronic instruments were a freedom that you didn't need to write down scores on paper, or you could make sound directly. So it's a really exciting moment that I think that musicians of our time are still developing and going back. And I'm working with a couple of very small Moog synthesizers, and in a way that's my tribute to Daphne Oram, but to that whole epoch, that whole time of experimentation, especially between acoustic instruments and electronic instruments.
Okay, so before this session, we were having a nice interview with Shiva about her practice, and so maybe this might feel like a bit of a repetition, but of course they were not in the interview. So, but we were discussing how your work can be regarded as belonging to the tradition of the turntablism. We had Janek Schaffer and Janek Schaffer in the first session of this program. So, and we were talking about how the fact that you are using, and you and Janek and Philippe and so many other artists are using turntables is in itself somehow ontological practice. So, and you were explaining us these very interesting ideas about how your music is built of memories somehow. I was hoping that you could explain a bit this relationship between your work and memory.
Yeah, I mean, it's very multifaceted in the sense that obviously with record players, turntables, CDJs alike, you can reference so many different moments of time, be it other music, other recordings. With the turntables and the vinyl, you've got all of these vinyl discs from different moments in time, and with that there's familiarities, unfamiliarity, and the actual act of physically manipulating a record by changing its speed, changing its direction, and creating materially a whole different sound from this one element in itself is like a really unusual feeling of knowing it's familiar. So for example, if I've got a record and it's a Stevie Wonder song, but I manipulate it so heavily, you can still kind of understand its familiarity or a memory of what that means, but at the same time it's gone to such a different level that it's also very unfamiliar. On the other end of the scale, I mean, there's just so many different ways of, referencing different yeah.
I think maybe we'll come back to you to discuss Daphne Oram, but before that, I would like to speak a bit with Serafín, and so he can explain a bit what the workshop he did today, how it also relates with this idea of memory in video games. And well, I mean, I'll let you just talk.
This morning we did a workshop right here, and it was more playful or practical or loaded than theoretical. We just played a video game, but silent, and we produced sound effects and music in real time to it. Like we had like several devices and things like Foley objects to make sound effects, and some synthesizers and things. But it relates to this ontological aspect that you were interested, because when Arnau invited me to develop a workshop, to think of a workshop to carry here, I immediately related, because he asked me to do a workshop, something to do with sound, music, and memory. And I started thinking about it, and there's something that I like or that I'm interested in video games, music and sounds that, well, it's long to explain, but I'm trying to summarize it. I think in this hauntological aspect, video games are full of ghosts, understood as ghosts that from the past that are haunting in the present. For example, video games is a well-matured medium that sometimes productions go far beyond in the film production in the film industry, but we continue to associate video games and the world of video games with like pixels and low fidelity images and sounds, 8-bit sounds and chiptunes and things like that. And another thing related to that is that I believe that I find early video game soundtracks and sounds fascinating. I think they are truly unique because part of it is because musicians had a difficult task because they had to produce music, but they were very limited by the format because they had tiny chips that they couldn't afford to record sounds because they wouldn't fit in the digital memory of those chips. So they had to write programs to produce sounds in real time from tiny amounts of digital data. So it was like they sounded like nothing else that we have listened to before. And I think that consciously or not, or unconsciously, today many people from my generation and many electronic musicians that are making electronic music today, our first relationship with electronic music or digitally produced music was through video games. But maybe we weren't conscious, and we were playing this game as a kids for hours, listening to small melodies, repeating over and over and over, in hours and hours listening to the same melody, and that's kind of embedded in our brains in some way. Think, for example, in the Tetris melody or the Super Mario melody is like a potential trigger of memories. So I was, when you proposed me to do a workshop, I was thinking about these things. Then the workshop, as I said, I wasn't like explaining like a conference or about this, but we just made a video game soundtrack in real time.
Right. Actually, I don't know if you agree, but what is somehow uncanny or strange about video games today is that they seem to look less and less as video games. You know, something like, I mean, what we understand as video games, we that were probably the first generation who grew up with video games, is that kind of video games. Also sound, also music in video games has become more and more like a soundtrack of
like a film soundtrack.
Big film. So it's funny how what it's just uncanny is not the retro, is not the lo-fi, the low-tech aspect of all video games, but precisely these move from this aesthetic, this I would say honest. I don't know if honest is the right word, but the fact that it's rudimentary and low tech, it makes it less uncanny somehow. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I guess it's a personal view because I guess newer, younger generations don't see it as we see it because they didn't grow up, playing Super Mario. But yeah, for me, seeing video games, especially video game soundtracks, so much like film soundtracks is uncanny to me. Yeah, it is.
It's like you're not able to make a difference almost of what's real and what's not real. So that's probably what's
it's what they call the uncanny valley. Actually, right. The term it refers to graphics, but I think music and sound could be said uncanny valley as well.
Right. So Shiva, you and Serafín are more or less the same generation. I was wondering, do you play video games? I mean, is this something you...
Yeah, I used to love video games. Yeah. It's very much part of my generation. PlayStation, Nintendo 64. Yeah, it's great. I really, it's so much embedded in what it means to be young for my generation, definitely. Yeah, I love video games, yeah.
And did they play a part, I mean, a role in your work somehow?
Yeah, I actually composed the Guitar Hero Concerto.
What? Sorry? I didn't know that.
About a long time ago now, very long time ago, I composed a piece for Guitar Hero because you had your own, compose your own function. So I composed the kind of solo Guitar Hero line. I got like quite a big YouTube gamer to premiere it. So it's like this guy, at the time, I think he had the most popular YouTube channel on YouTube. His name was Freddie Wong. I don't know if you know who that is, but he was like this massive Guitar Hero fanatic and major geek. And I got him to play the Guitar Hero with an ensemble, so it's an ensemble of like woodwind and strings and stuff. It was really fun. It was really fun. It was good. And then at the end of the piece, you just hear the crowd cheering in the game. It's like the level is complete, or the like piece is complete.
Right. So maybe then I would like to take the topic of the video games to Barbara, but maybe it's better that we watch the two videos I sent, video 1 and 2. We can just play one after the other, and then we will discuss what we will see with Barbara.
Hi, I'm Denson. Hi, I'm Denson C. Bainbridge, and this is Lisa Joy. The Vectrex is still functioning. It will still play video games, and it's been modified to take 3 inputs for the horizontal, the vertical, and the brightness from synths that I've designed to plug into it. So I'll pop in the horizontal, and now the vertical, and finally I'll plug in the brightness. And now the brightness is also from the synth. And all the shapes that you see on the screen are created by a relationship, a harmonic relationship between those three signals. I'm really interested in calligraphic brush and ink, but a negative and glowing quality that Lisa Joy can have. I'm creating a beautiful mess, things slashing across the tube, scrawling graffiti all over the face of the CRT.
Right. So what we just saw is the first video was of a piece by Barbara and his collaborator, who is this artist. And then he was Benton C. Bainbridge, and so the first was a collaboration, and the second was him explaining how this device, this musical instrument, how video game worked. But I was hoping that you could talk a bit how this collaboration started and if it's still going on.
Yes. Benton and I have been collaborating for years. He's one of the first generations of live video artists, first using cameras and processing from the camera, and also experimenting with experimental television, video synthesizers. And he's one of a tribe of people who use the Vectrex, these vintage video games, as consoles for live improvisation, because the definition of the screen of the Vectrex is really special. It has an incredible kind of calligraphy. So Benton has modified these consoles, and he creates the forms with the video synthesizer, but then the Vectrex, he can modify the X and Y axis. And this instrument actually has a name. It's named after the scientist who invented the oscilloscope, the XY axis thing, who was a French man named Lisa Joy. So this instrument is named Lisa Joy. And Benton uses this console in most of his performances. Sometimes he captures the image with the camera, and then he puts it through more processing and projects. The installation that we saw first is a piece that we made together. That is, it's a project that was originally made for the Science Museum in Tenerife, as a sonification of scientific data of solar gases, the solar pulsations that the scientists are studying. And most of the scientific data now is like telescopes no longer see real images. They're just a series of numbers, and then those numbers are sometimes turned into sound, or they're turned into another kind of image. A telescope or a microscope, it's always just the numbers. So from the numbers of these solar gases, I converted it into a piece that takes a little fragment of flute, like a pixel of the sound of my flute, and converts the numbers of the solar gases into modifications of the harmonic series of the flute. And then the sound is going into the synthesizer, and it's modifying the shapes of the forms of the image.
Right. I think this is a very different kind of video game, of course, from the ones you were mentioning. Even older. I'm not an expert at all about in the history of video games, but you mentioned before this idea of the ghost that haunts video games. I was wondering what you meant with that, and I don't know if this is illustrative somehow of this idea. And I understand that what you're mentioning is something that has to do with the glitch aesthetic, maybe.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know.
Yeah, I think not only the glitch aesthetic, but like retro video game aesthetics in general. I think video games and music as well, there is a very big like retromaniac community. And I think in software or in aesthetics, but also in hard work, I'm, for example, I don't consider myself a retro maniac or a retro person at all, but I do keep some older, not as old as the Vectrex, but I keep a Super Nintendo, for example, or a PlayStation, the original PlayStation, and things like that. And yeah, I don't have an answer or an explanation. What do they make them so fascinating? But there's a big community, and I think the Bakers. I didn't know it actually before you sent the link through email. I have heard the name, but I just Googled it very quickly, and I saw that the images are not pixels as we are used to see digital images today. They are vector images, so it's like, for those who don't know, they are not pixels rendered on the screen, but they are like kind of a coordinate system, and there's no lines between those points, so this could be theoretically scaled upwards without losing resolution. And I find the image fascinating. I saw it in my computer and it was fascinating, but today bigger on the projection. Not this glitch aesthetic, but also it's a haunting, ghostly image in a way. This oscilloscope or whatever they're called, these shapes. I think they're really nice. What was your question again? Sorry.
No. I was simply trying to make a connection between what we just saw and this idea of the ghost in the machine, which is not only it's not exclusive from the video games, but it's also of course part of the whole. And in relation to the glitch, I was thinking, of course, in how turntablism is probably also somehow related with this aesthetic of the error and the failure also, and how in a way this is part of the trick to break this simulacra and make evident that it's something related with memory, with something that is haunted behind the format. I don't know, but also when looking at, I didn't think about it before, but when we were looking at the video now, I couldn't help thinking about Daphne Orum's Oramics, and how in a way this is almost like an inverse process. So I think it's a good way so we can start talking about Daphne Oram. Well, you know, so the last session in the program was devoted to Ghost Box Label, and Julian House came and we had this nice live show by Pike Corner Audio, and he played a super nice DJ set. It was amazing. Well, they are so much influenced by the BBC Radiophonic Workshop and the work of Daphne Oram, who is also someone very, very important in the context of Shiva's work. And so it makes so much sense that we are, so today Barbara and Shiva will play together, but Daphne Oram is haunting the whole set, the whole concert. And I didn't think about the fact that, well, the image we just saw, this video, it's pretty much the reverse of the Oramics. I wasn't planning to introduce Daphne Oram through the Oramics, but maybe could you explain a bit who Daphne Oram was, how it is important for you? And
Yeah. So Daphne Oram was a really incredible artist. She was a composer, she was an inventor, she was an engineer, she was an academic. And one of her defining elements of her work, and this was in around the 1960s and the late 1950s, was that she invented an optical synthesizer called the Aramix machine. And this was one of the first known synthesizers to actually be created. And the way that it works is that the sound is drawn on film and then it's processed optically, and then the drawn sound relates to different parameters of the sound. So, for example, the octave, the vibrato, the actual 12-tone scale, the volume, the dynamics. So it was actually in a way, very classical. The way that the synthesizer works is very classical, and it goes back to what Barbara was saying about, composers like Daphne Oram were part of, and other composers like Eliana Deeg or Pauline Oliveros, they're part of this more radical, progressive, left field approach to composition, where they were originally classically trained, but then because of the barriers and obstacles that female composers had in the mid-20th century and onwards, they were forced to work independently, and electronics and electronic music really affords that independence to actually grow a new form of music, a new form of art. So there was, on one hand, this adversity, but then on the other hand, this amazing progression and growth that then defined the future of electronic music as a result. Yeah.
So actually, Susan Chiani mentioned this exact same thing, that how she was almost invited to abandon the establishment, the musical establishment, in order to, start other forms of music creation. I wonder, Barbara, if you have felt the same situation somehow. I mean, is this something you can recognize yourself in? I mean, because you're also a great experimental musician. But you are classically trained. So I'm thinking of another flutist, actually, Christina Kubis, who explains pretty much the same story and how. So I was wondering if you would like to comment on this.
No, most of the experimental music that happened in the 60s and 70s, most of the strongest music was partly because musicians were searching for a way of, like you said, being able to make the sound directly instead of being in the classical music establishment. That's not the only reason, but it was one reason. And like the composer Robert Ashley always said, that the most experimental music is if you write for an orchestra, because they never rehearse, they play it once, and so it was not only because it made life easier, but also exploring the direct relationship to an instrument that made sound, and that you manipulated the sound, and wasn't a relationship between a composer and a performer that you had to explain or you had to write down a score.
So maybe we can, I would like to talk a bit about your, it's not a reenactment, it's actually a finalization of a work that was not finished by Daphne Oram. Maybe we can see the video for a still point. Is it the video number 3? So
My next guest, Shiva Feshiraki, welcome, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give Shiva a very warm welcome. Spillers in Cardiff. Now, Shiva, as I alluded to before the news, you do lots of different things. You're a composer and a turntablist, but what you're doing doesn't come out of the hip-hop tradition. Where does it come from?
Well, a lot of the turntabling techniques that I use, they're kind of techniques that I've kind of independently made up sort of as a loner, but then it was really getting into the work.
That is more like an anecdote.
Vinyl, and then manipulating it into a completely
in the
different
context of this program. But how did it
And there's a gig next
go?
week for you in London. What's that
How
about?
it was born?
I'm doing a club night with
with
Mesh,
this
Kobe Say and
composition,
Emma,
this is a
and that's at
composition
the
called
South
Still
Bank
Point,
Centre, and that's the
that
Concrete
Daphne
Lakes.
Oram
So that's April
composed in
27th. So do come along if you
1949
want
at
to
the
dance.
age of
Okay,
24.
Friday night on the South Bank doesn't
And,
sound too bad at all.
I
So what are you
came
going to do for us now?
across
You're going to
the
give us some
pencil
live
draft
turntable
score,
in business, but your own
of this
techniques, right?
composition in
Yes,
the
I'm gonna
Goldsmiths
do some
University archive, and I was shown it by James Bully, who then became my collaborator on the project. And this composition was, you know, an incredible composition because it displayed, even in the score, a form of live electronics in that is a manipulation of acoustic material, and it was written in 1949, so it was actually one of the first known compositions with live electronics in it. But it had never been performed. It was never performed at the time. And also what was really kind of incredible for me to see as a turntablist and as a composer that works with orchestras is that this composition was scored for 378 RPM discs and 3 turntables and 2 orchestras and microphone techniques. So the composition was incredibly forward-thinking for its time. So we made it our aim to find the world premiere performance of this composition, which eventually ended up being the premiere performance at the BBC Proms in 2018, 70 years after Daphne Oram composed the piece. And actually, coincidentally, Daphne Oram, when she was in her early 20s, was working as a music balancer or a sound engineer at the BBC Proms during World War II. So when she was at the BBC Proms at the Royal Albert Hall working as a sound engineer, her job was that when the hall had to be evacuated, she'd seamlessly mix in the recordings on discs if there's an air raid or something like that. So then the broadcast wouldn't be disturbed. So people listening to the broadcast would not know that the live orchestra had to be evacuated. So actually this experience, this quite unusual experience that Daphne Oram had as a composer, actually fed into the inspiration for this unique composition that she wrote called Still Point. And it's amazing that we could at least get it performed in that context that the inspiration came to her, albeit 70 years on. Yeah.
So, did she actually record sound in 45 records, or she did this, or this was something that wasn't done?
When she was working as a music balancer for the BBC Proms, she was using 78 RPM discs with the orchestral symphonies on the discs, so that when there was an orchestra playing live and the orchestra had to be evacuated, she'd seamlessly mix in the 78 RPM discs so that the broadcast wasn't disturbed if there was an evacuation. So that's how she was using it on a functional level as part of her job as an engineer during the BBC Proms. But then she took that experience and created a composition. But then instead of it just being seamlessly mixed in, she writes bullet points such as slow the speed of the RPM down so that it's an octave lower than the real time. Or she'd say reverse the turntable motor so that you're starting at the edge of the sound and reversing. And this was in duet with the actual orchestral material that she also composed. So she was a really fantastic orchestral composer. So she scored this brilliant orchestral music, which was then in duet with the disc material, which was then manipulated electronically in duet with the acoustic orchestra.
Right. No, what I meant is.
Oh,
So no. But it's fantastic that you explained it again. But so these were instructions. So what, or there was actual records with these recordings. I mean.
It's instructions.
Right.
So the whole the element of my job in the realization of Still Point was actually taking these bullet points and then realizing it in a creative and artistic and practical level. Right. Because also I had to think about it as a collaboration as well, sort of like a parallel universe, parallel time collaboration between Daphne Oram in 1949 and me as a turntablist in 2018. And it had to somehow feel like this parallel motion was making sense, somehow. And that, that in itself became quite cryptic, and it became quite intangible in a way.
I think it's 100% hauntological.
Yes, yeah,
it is a hauntological collaboration between you and Daphne Oram somehow. And would you like to share the story with us?
I never really thought I'd share this particular story because my friends always tell me, "Oh, don't share this one when you do interviews." But because of the hauntological theme of this evening, I think it's only fair that I say. So at first, when we were realizing Still Point for a performance in 2016, we actually gave a premiere performance of Still Point in 2016 at the South Bank Centre with the pencil draft score. And then we were looking for the finalized score of Still Point, and we couldn't find it, and it was basically a lost score. But then, by happenstance, James Bully actually found the finalized score 2 years later, which is why we gave the BBC Proms performance. But before we got there, and we were working on the first version with the pencil draft, I had this really vivid dream that Daphne Oram was in my dream and giving me clues about how to realize the piece. And we were in the Goldsmiths archive, and then she was saying to me, "Oh, you don't need to be here, it's not here. It's I'm not here, it's not here, but it's okay." And then she kept saying, "Oh, Scheherazade, it's Scheherazade." And she kept kind of telling me about Scheherazade. And I remember telling James, Daphne Oram, I had a dream with Daphne Oram in it, and she kept saying Scheherazade, and she kept saying she's not in the Goldsmiths library. But then when James actually, by chance as well, by total chance, wasn't even looking for it at the time, was doing another job, he came across the finalized copy of Still Point. It was a completely different composition to the one we had realized in 2016. So we'd essentially given a world premiere performance of a different composition of Daphne Oram's with the instructions of Still Point that were on it. So, but then the actual composition, it was a different score altogether, but it had thematic material of Scheherazade and Rimsky-Korsakov in it. So it felt like such a freaky kind of feeling for me, because I had this Scheherazade dream, and all of the different kind of her saying it's not here, the score's not here, and it felt very freaky. But this whole process of having to work quite cryptically and try and read between the lines, really, to realize this composition, the whole thing felt so freaky, really, for me.
Yeah, it's a ghost story.
Yeah.
With a happy ending. I think we can not ignore the fact that we are wearing masks. This is a very strange situation. It's I thought, no, I'm not going to ask this question, but it is really strange. And the other day, Rock Jimenez, who is a super interesting artist and a friend, he used this phrase. We weren't talking about the program or anything, but he said, yeah, these last few months, memory has turned into some sort of smashed potato. I mean, and I think what he meant is that memory is working very differently these days. During the last few months, I don't know, and I would like to know how it's been for you, each one of you. How have you been coping with this situation, and how has it influenced you were talking before in the interview how this show is very, very important, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe each one of you could share with us, if you want, how it's been in creative terms, but also personally maybe, and especially in relation to the notion of memory, how this pandemic has been affecting or contributing to your thoughts and work.
Well, I don't know so much about memory, but music has to be made among people, and it's been really, really difficult. Musicians are trying everything, trying online concerts, all kinds of different connections. But for me, that connection to other people and to other musicians is the most difficult. And whatever will happen now, whatever will happen after this, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is the first live performance that I'm giving since the pandemic occurred. So I'm really, really, really kind of feeling a really, really deep energy for this evening's performance. And, you know, we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is like such a turbulent time for the whole planet right now. And, you know, I just feel like all of these feelings and all of this energy is really reflected and in how I'm going to play tonight, because, you know, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and, you know, there's no kind of place now for like nice, pleasantries. But also the connection of the energy of feeling that energy. When I perform, you know, it's all about feeling the living energy of the space. So like feeling the connection with Barbara, the subconscious, kind of like almost telepathic, feeling the energy kind of going back and forth, whatever that energy might be, but also feeling the energy of the audience in the space and using that energy and giving that energy. And, you know, it makes you that vulnerability of actually feeling vulnerable on stage and presenting music in a vulnerable way. You know, we need that more than ever right now, because, you know, to give that to other people, that energy, that vulnerability, it reminds us what it means to be a human being, really, and what it means to be alive, and what it means to love, and what it means to have emotions, really. And yeah, I don't know, I've got really strong emotions at the moment. You know, I've got a lot of big emotions, yeah, and that's gonna come out in the music tonight, yeah.
I don't know what to say. It's a difficult question for me as an artist. It's been difficult because I'm also a teacher. I teach at university, so I started combining teaching in the classroom with online teaching, and I thought, well, at the beginning I thought this is fantastic. I'm gonna have plenty of time to do my art projects, but it wasn't like that. In 2 days I was like with loads of work for the university, and today I feel very, very weird. It's like being on a different planet, totally, because I think it's the first time I talk publicly since, I don't know, 10 months, something like that. So, and wearing masks and you know, this COVID protocol everybody feels like everything is like super vulnerable or something. You feel like you're stepping on glass, or so it's like on a different planet. And I also feel some of the things that Shiva said, like these strong emotions of giving meaning to things that weren't so meaningful to me before this pandemic started.
And do you think that memory has been working differently are you, or the feeling of time? I mean, it's been radically strange, so to say. So,
yeah, if anything, I mean that the idea, if anything, time itself is just, the idea of time is just completely the single most important thing to think about right now, the idea of time and how we fit into time and what is time and what is our understanding of time. Is it a multifaceted, multi-dimensional thing? What's beyond our understanding of time, and in order to actually see beyond something like this pandemic, we have to actually see beyond ourselves and beyond what it means to be in this moment and transcend beyond that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the sense of time or the perception of time has radically changed. One friend, when we were in the lockdown, said a sentence that it was very simple, but it made me think. She said, "We're locked in space, but we're not locked in time." And it is like a very simple sentence, but it was super true, like this sense of, yeah, you were not able to go outside, but you felt that time was passing, and this strange feeling of doing a lot of things, but kind of not doing anything at the same time. And it has also, we don't plan ahead, because we don't know what will happen tomorrow. So this kind of sense of time towards the future has changed completely.
Yeah,
as well.
Kind of like, I just feel like just throughout the pandemic so far, I've just felt time moving so quickly and so slowly at the same time.
Yep.
It's been really crazy feeling, just that sense of both moving really quickly and really slowly at the same time, yeah.
yeah, I think that's what Rock meant with, memories becoming smashed potatoes.
Yeah,
because
definitely.
There is this no logical feeling about time anymore. So it can be super fast or super slow. So it's definitely something that relates to memory and how things are located in different moments. And I was told that before the performance start, they will need to clean everything. So we will need to leave. And before that, of course, I was wondering if there are any questions, any comments, anything you would like to ask or share? Right. So if there's no questions, then I just think we can finish. I would like to thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we will need to leave the room and come back again in a few minutes. Well, actually, in half an hour, something like that. Thank you so much.